The Tarrant County Master Gardener Association has partnered with the Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
My name is Loretta Bailey. As they said, I teach gardening in North Texas at TCC. And like a lot of you, welcome interns, by the way. I am a Tarrant County Master Gardener, a citizen forester, master naturalist, and a propagation specialist. So I'm going to try to set you up to be successful in growing plants from seeds, and also give you some of the downsides of seeds and some problems that you might come across. So let's get started. Okay. So why do we want to start plants from seeds? Well, you can save money, grow plants economically. You can share or swap with friends and family. As a matter of fact, in my TCC class, my students love to do it. So I gave them this exact presentation, and they are now growing their seeds. And at the end of class, the last class, we were going to swap, because who needs 100 tomato plants or 30 pepper plants? I mean, maybe some of you, if you're making salsa or something, but most people want to swap, save money. Seeds, get a jump start for spring. I know it's a little later right now, but you can still start all of your plants from seeds if you want. Also, experiment and learn more about plants. Not all plants should be started from seed, to be honest. For example, rosemary and thyme, those honestly are better started from cuttings, because who wants to sit there and wait for seeds to grow into a plant? And a lot of times those seeds have a hard time germinating. So your germination rate, germination for some of you who don't know what that means, is your seed, basically a plant coming out of that little seed pod, growing out of the seed and becoming a plant. So germination. Rosemary and thyme have a very low germination rate, whereas basil has a very good germination rate. A lot of you have probably grown basil, and you know that that plant can reseed itself, and it's kind of the plant that keeps on giving. Year to year, you'll see little baby basil plants popping up. So if you want to start plants from seed, that's great. Also note that sometimes seeds can have a different color flower than you expected, or a different fruit or vegetable. For instance, if you have a great garden going and you want to duplicate those peppers you grew, well, a bee may have come by and cross-pollinated your flower. So next year, if you save those seeds, next year they might be a mixed breed. You may not have those same jalapenos. It may have crossed with the peppers next to it and created more of like a round pepper versus your little small jalapenos. I've also saved moss rose seeds from a pink variety. When I planted them the next year, they came out white and yellow. So do note things like that. It may not be an exact replica of where you retrieved those seeds from, but yes, for the most part, you will still have that same tomato plant or whatnot. It might just be a cross, like a different variety. If you want the exact clone of a plant, what you have to do is take a cutting. So let's say you have a desert willow and you want to replicate that. Well, like I have a white desert willow. when I save the seeds of that plant and grow additional trees, the flowers come out pink because my neighbor has a pink desert willow. So if I want to propagate that desert willow, I actually have to cut some cuttings from it, use my rooting hormone, plant it, and do that method to clone and get those white flowers, the white flower variety. So now you kind of have a quick overview of when you should use seeds and when you shouldn't. Make sure you do a Google search of your plants and find out, what's the best method? Is it better just to do cuttings from your neighbor or from a rosemary plant that you already have? Or is it better to go out and get seeds? That way you won't waste your time or money or patience, and you can move on with your other gardening duties. All right, so indoor seed starting tips and overview. I am going to go into more in-depth information on all of these, but this is just a general overview of what I'm going to talk about. Okay, first, when you plant seeds at home, you really need to choose a sunny window. And what I mean by sunny window is a south-facing window. Again, south. North is going to be too shady. West and east are okay, but it's generally not enough. You're going to end up with little plants, little baby plants, seedlings that are leggy. So they're going to be thin, not very robust, not really something you're going to be proud of or brag about. Yes, you will have plants, but they're not going to be great or typically what you would find at a big box store or a nursery store. So if you don't have a really good south window, use grow lights. They're not that expensive. Bottom left-hand picture with the purple background, those are grow lights, and they have blue, red, and white spectrum to mimic the sun's rays. So you will have more growth, bushier growth, something you can be proud of. Let me go on. Seeds germinate better when the environment is warm, 70 to 75 degrees typically. If you keep your house really cold, 60 degrees, your seeds may not want to germinate. So if you typically do that, you may want to invest in a heated mat. That's that picture on the bottom right, the black and green picture. Those also are not very expensive. And of course, these are all optional. But if you do have problems and your house is too cold, you may want to invest in that. A lot of commercial facilities that grow plants from seeds have the heated tables, or a lot of them use a system where hot water goes through a system underneath the table to replicate a warmer environment so the seeds will have a better germination rate. Seed starting soil, the top left picture, you can buy any brand. That's just one picture that I posted, and also to the right of it, that's another brand, seed starting mix. That is not a marketing gimmick. It is actually better to use those if you're starting seeds, because that soil has been sterilized, and it's usually a fluffier, softer soil so that your little seeds can germinate and they don't have to go through a bunch of big chunks of bark and chunks of soil. It's going to be a little more friendly for growing seeds. And like I said, less pathogens like fungus, bacteria, and things like that. And I'm going to talk more about that issue later. A lot of people are, they can't succeed with seeds because of a lot of the fungus and bacteria that happens. So I promise you we will get into that so that hopefully you won't come into any issues like that. So plant your seeds and keep them moist, but not soggy. It should never be dripping wet. Just think about a pond or something that's, that's always kind of soggy, anaerobic, not a good thing. Your soil should be moist, kind of like a moist sponge that's wrung out, always moist, but never dry. If your seedlings start to grow and then the soil dries out, that's it. Those roots are so tiny and delicate that they can't sustain that type of environment. They need that constant moisture. So don't ever let it dry out. Always keep them moist. Okay, plant seeds at the right depth. Your seed packet that you purchase on the back will always tell you, plant it a 1/4 inch deep. or 1/2 inch deep. The general rule, it's not always the case, is the bigger the seed, the deeper it goes. So make sure you read the back of the packet. If you acquired seeds from a friend and don't have that information, Google search it and you will get that information. Some seeds need to be scattered just right on top of the soil because they germinate with light. So that's why it's really important to know where and how deep to plant your seeds. Then we will talk about thinning overcrowded seedlings, how to harden them off, how to transplant or bump up at the right time, and only if you need, fertilize at half strength. It's usually not necessary when you use these specific potting mixes, but if you see that your plants aren't as robust as you'd like, you can use fertilizer at half strength. I like to use more organic options, especially for vegetables like fish emulsion, seaweed fertilizer, things like that. But that's completely up to you. Okay, so when should you start these seeds indoors? Our last average frost date was yesterday. Some people say March 12. You know, people have different rules, but generally speaking, the last average frost date was yesterday. So ideally, you would have started your seeds back in January or February, but it's not too late. You can still do this, but sometimes it's better just at this rate to go ahead and start your seeds outdoors. Okay, when to start seeds outdoors? Well, anytime, spring through fall. Check the seed packet because it always varies by plant. Some seeds are actually better sown directly outdoors versus starting them inside your house in those little containers. One example is cucumbers. Those are okay. You can go out and buy them. You can start them inside, but they have a tendency to break. And I find that I have better success when I just plant those seeds right outside. Of course, you need to wait until it warms up because they're very fragile to cold temperatures. Another good example is morning glory. You can start those inside, the morning glory vine, but they don't like their roots disturbed. So by the time you plant it outside, it might act a little finicky. So I like to start those straight outdoors. So again, do your research. All right, most of you as interns and master gardeners probably know what these definitions are, but I need to bring this up quickly just in case there are a few of you out there who don't know what these are. So annuals grow that year only, 1 year life cycle, from seed to the end of their life, 1 year. Biennials, on the other hand, takes 2 years to complete their life cycle. Perennials grow year after year, and there are tender perennials and hardy perennials. Tender perennials will usually, they might die in the winter. They're not as hardy, whereas the hardy perennials will survive our winter without being protected. The hardy perennials are things like hardy hibiscus, hardy water lilies, if you're into ponds and aquatic containers. So always try to get hardy perennials if you can, because they return year after year. On perennials, let's say you start some purple coneflower, echinacea, which is a native to our area. If you start those by seed, that's great. But note, those will not bloom in their first year. A lot of times people will look at them and go, they don't like my soil, it's just not working out. And they end up plucking them thinking they're not blooming. Well, give them another year or two, they will get there. A lot of plants are like that. They need a year or two to get going and to develop enough root to put enough energy into blooming flowers. So give it some extra time. All right, growing plants from seeds. Very important, label your stored seeds. Let's say your neighbor Dan gave you some cucumber seeds and then grandma gave you some melon seeds. They look very much alike. So dry them out and put them in a little envelope or those brown lunch bags. Those are the best because they can still dry out a little bit. If they're completely dry, then you can do what I do. The bottom left picture, I like to use sandwich bags because I can see the seeds inside, and I write down what they are, where I got them, the date. So for instance, I'll write rosemary seeds from neighbor Dan, March 2021, or seeds from the TCMGA Demo Gardens vegetable garden. So be sure to label, because if you want to plant those seeds 3 years from now, how do you know what they are? You have to label them. Also label your planted seeds, name and date that you planted them. The reason that's important is because let's say the top right corner, see how I plant, or that's actually somebody else's picture, but those are recycled Keurig containers. And those are great for seed starting. It already has a little drainage hole on the bottom. The newer Keurig models will actually poke about 4 or 5 holes, but I have found through my experience, even that one little hole is sufficient for drainage. And I even water from the bottom up. So I'll put water into the saucer underneath all of those little Keurig containers, and it'll soak up the water. And that's how I prefer to water seeds, actually. So make sure you put the name of what you planted and the date, because let's say you planted basil seeds, and tomatoes, cucumbers, and eggplant. Little baby seedlings, they all look the same. It's really hard to decipher what's what. So it'll help you. And also the date planted is important, because basil, for instance, takes 5 to 7 days to germinate. If it's been 2 weeks and you don't see any green, any plants, something's wrong. Either there's a fungal issue, or maybe you didn't water enough, it's just too cold, something's wrong, and then you can investigate, what did I do wrong, and learn from that. So make sure, name, date of what you planted. Where to store seeds you've saved. I love collecting seeds, as you can tell. That's just, that bottom left picture is just a sample of what I have collected from you guys, my master gardening friends, students at TCC, family, neighbors. Make sure what I like to do, some seeds, we'll talk about this later, need cold stratification. Some seeds need cold stratification, like a little cold period. Some seeds you can just store in your home and they'll be fine. So again, make sure you research that. But sometimes I don't always have time to sit there and research every little seed I have. I'll just collect it, dry it, put it in its bag, label it, and stash it away. You can put them in your refrigerator, or you can leave them. I have a little cabinet on my patio, and I just put it in there because it'll go through the whole cycle of being warm, hot, cool, and then cold in the winter, and go through that cycle. So do your research if your seeds need cold stratification. And again, we will talk more about what that is. Use repurposed containers to save money. I like to use those little Keurig containers. And then top left, we've got egg crates. Use your imagination. And on the bottom right there, that is a commercially available, at any big box store, seed starting trays. And it's got the little clear top on it, the little dome. That dome comes in handy for helping your seeds germinate, because it creates like a greenhouse effect. It gives moisture, it doesn't allow them to dry out, and it kind of protects them and keeps them maybe a little warmer. It doesn't get the AC gusts and such. So it's a really good incubating environment for your seeds. So I like to cover my seeds. I have better luck doing that. Once your seeds start to germinate, you can lift that off. You don't want to keep that dome on there too long. Oh, we just talked about that. Remove after germination. All right. Seed viability test. I'm going to talk about this because, like I said, I like to save a lot of seeds. And hopefully you guys do too after this. Friends can swap, whatnot. Well, when you save your seeds, it might be 3-4 years down the line. When you buy seeds at the store, notice on the back, it'll say there's like an expiration date. it'll say something like packed for year 2020. Well, 2021, they're not expired necessarily, but let's say they are now 10 years old, and 10-year-old seeds may not be as viable, meaning they may not germinate. Do a quick little test. Put them in between a wet paper towel. Make sure you label it. This is just a picture I found, but I would do 1 seed per sandwich bag just to make sure nothing gets mixed. So put your little cucumber seeds or whatever seeds you like in between the paper towel, spritz it with water or just gently put it under some water, make sure it's damp, slide it into a sandwich bag and Ziploc it. Then find out how long it takes for those seeds to germinate. And if they've all sprouted, that's 100% germination rate. So that's great. Go ahead and plant them. You can plant even these little test seeds that you have. Just take them off the paper towel and plant them. Let's say that your seeds are super old and only 50% of them germinated. Well, you still don't have to throw those away. You can, if you don't want to waste your time because only 50% germinated, that's fine. But what I would do is, let's say you're supposed to plant 2 seeds per hole, go ahead and double it or triple it. Go ahead and plant 4 or 5, just to make sure you will get a better germination rate, knowing that 50% of them may not germinate. Okay, scarification, I touched on this earlier. This is important because some seeds need scarification help. That is physically damaging the seed's protective shell. It helps the seed to burst out of its shell and grow. Some seeds, some of the larger seeds, have a very thick shell, and we need to kind of help it a little bit. We kind of need to act like nature and help scrape off some of that covering. Or another way to scarify is to use acids like orange juice. Some people have used vinegar. Some people have even frozen the seeds and then stuck them in boiling water to kind of shock it and crack it. So it depends on the seed. Of course, you're not going to do something like that with a tender melon seed or pepper seed because those don't need scarification. Only some seeds need this type of treatment. And here are some examples. Morning glories, those don't need a lot. You basically can just soak those in water overnight and they will pop out of their shell. They need a little bit of soaking to soften their shell and bust out of its seed shell. Mountain laurels, those need a little bit of sanding action. Just get some sandpaper and gently scrub that outer seed coating until you see a little bit of the inside, kind of like the nut inside. Sometimes forest fires are needed for certain trees. A fire has to go through to scarify that seed for that tree to actually germinate. So that's just nature's way of preservation and to help future generations of seeds. So we will go on to the next topic. Oh, here's an example actually that I did. That is a lotus seed. It's an aquatic plant. It looks like a water lily, but the leaves actually suspend up in the air instead of laying on top of the water surface. So that seed needs some help. If you just put those in water, you're going to have a very low germination rate. So that little black stick in the background is my nail file. You can use sandpaper if you want. And it took a couple minutes. It was a very, very hard seed shell, but I scraped until I saw a little bit of that seed on the inside. And I had 100% germination rate with the 3 seeds that I had by using this method. So again, if you have some seeds that you found, friends gave it to you, look to see if it needs some scarification so you can up and boost your germination rate. Cold stratification, on the other hand, is that seed needs a cold period. It's simulating the natural colder parts of the year and breaking the seed's dormancy. So basically, it's telling the seed, okay, it's warm right now, and then you go into the winter months, and then when it warms up again, it alerts the seed, oh, it's warm now. It's time for me to break out of the shell and grow. If the seed does not get that cold period, it'll just stay dormant. So these are seeds. There are many more. I'm just giving a few examples here of seeds that need cold stratification to boost their germination rate. Butterfly bush, I won't read all of these, but you get the idea. And then on the bottom right, I added a note. When you buy a commercially packaged seed packet, the producer of that seed has already done that for you, unless it says otherwise. So you don't have to worry about it. It's already been done. Go ahead and plant it. But this applies to seeds that you collected from grandma, neighbor. You're going to have to take it into your own hands and do the right thing to get that seed to germinate. All right, so you planted your seeds. You're waiting for them to germinate. You're being really patient. Remember that plastic dome cover I talked about? Remember to uncover it periodically, because what happens when you have a very moist environment? You can get mold, mildew, bacteria, fungus. So open it up and just kind of air it out a little bit. Just kind of fan it. Do it periodically. Starting seeds is not, it's easy, but it's not easy peasy. There is a little bit of maintenance required. You have to be on top of it, make sure they're not drying out, make sure there's not any fungus. So there is responsibility that you need. You can't just set it and forget it. So remember to uncover that dome periodically and just kind of let it dry out. And really, I use this method even for cuttings and propagating, shrubs and trees. When you plant your cutting and you put it in a little Ziploc bag so that it's moist and has its, little greenhouse effect, you want to open that up and kind of let some fresh air get in there and zip it back up. Just like we want fresh air, so do your plants. Water appropriately. Never, ever let your seedlings sit in water, because you're going to create that damp, bad environment where pathogens can multiply and cause some issues. Okay, watch for those fungal issues. I will show you some specific examples and what to do so that you can remedy the issue and also try to avoid it from happening in the first place. Okay, damping off disease is when you've got the fungus and the mold growing in your seeds. Your poor little seedlings, they're too weak. They can't fend that off, so they end up dying. And this is the #1 reason why people tend to fail at planting seeds. So let's talk about damping off. See these pictures here at the top? You see those white spores, and then the picture in the middle. It almost looks like somebody pinched that stem and the plant fell over. The bottom right, that plant just turned crispy. It just died. These are all the symptoms of damping off disease. Okay. If you planted some seeds and you don't see any growth, again, the no growth or patchy growth, that is a sign that something is wrong in that soil. So that's why it's really important to start off right. You're going to use seed starting soil, okay? And you're going to sterilize. Make sure you sterilize everything you use. Prevention is key. Start off right. I like to use a 10% bleach solution or Lysol. You can use Lysol, the liquid, and you mix it with water, but make sure you sanitize everything. If you're using repurposed pots, go ahead and put those in a 10% bleach solution and let it sit there for a good hour so that it can do its thing. Your tools, you may want to use clean hands, maybe some gloves, but kind of treat it like surgery. You don't want even one little speck of bacteria to get in there and cause these issues. You want 100% germination rate and no problems at all. But like I said, this is the main reason why people fail at starting plants from seeds, because of damping off. So let's try to avoid that. We talked about this, using specific seed starting mix. I have seen this time and time again at all the big box stores. I'm sure Amazon, I know for a fact Amazon has it. You don't have to use seed starting mix. I've used regular potting soil and did okay. But if you have this damping off issue happen a lot, please go out and buy the seed starting mix. I like to water my plants from the bottom. Avoid wetting the leaves because when the leaves are wet, they're more apt to get fungal issues and whatnot. So let's say you've got your little pots in a little tray underneath. I like to just gently water into the saucer and let the plants soak it up slowly. Then I go check it after about 20, 30 minutes. If there's any excess, be sure to get rid of it. You can use like a turkey baster and get rid of it, or gently pour it out, but don't ever let it sit in water. We don't want that. That's a stagnant, bad situation. Good air circulation. We talked about this early. Don't overcrowd. You want to give them some air, some space. This is a really good tip that works. After you plant your seeds, sprinkle some cinnamon on top of the soil. It's going to look a little funny, but go ahead and do that. It helps to prevent, fungal issues and things like that. It's just kind of a natural organic remedy. Okay, so let's say you've done everything right, everything I've told you, but you may have overwatered before you left for the weekend, something just happened. I don't know, maybe a friend sneezed on your plants and now you've got, this fungal bacterial growth. Well, it doesn't mean it's over. You can still do some things to increase your chances of success. So manually remove what you can. Remember those little white spores? You can use a toothpick or something like that, or a old fork. Gently remove what you can. Get rid of the majority of what you can see. Create better air circulation and recheck your watering habits. Make sure you're not overwatering. Go ahead, if there's just a big old mass of fungus, mold growing, your plants are already drooping, they've got the pinched stem or they're brown, go ahead and scrap those pots, call it a loss, move on, keep your healthy ones, but do go ahead and get rid of those if it's just out of control, because you don't want that spreading to your healthy pots. This is a trick that I use. If I do see some of that growing, lightly spray it with peroxide. I actually have a peroxide bottle that has a sprayer on it that I bought from the store already. It already came that way. You can just lightly spray and it will help you get rid of the fungal issues. If your plants are a little bit more mature, you can use neem oil. Neem oil is great at treating a lot of different issues, fungal issues and such. You may still lose some plants, so don't be too hard on yourself. Sometimes it takes more than one try to be successful at something. So don't give up, try it the first time, don't give up, just keep trying. And, maybe you need to start off with more than a dozen just to ensure you will have a few that will make it. But if you follow these steps, you really shouldn't have any issues. And by the time spring gets here, you'll have so many that you can trade with your friends. Okay, so you've gone through the process of watering, taking care of them. They're in a really good environment. Well, this is the hard step for me because I've nurtured them, taken care of them, and now it's time to thin your seedlings, also known as culling. So you're basically eliminating competition. The reason you have to do this is because those little baby plants, they need to grow, widen, get taller. And when there's another baby plant right next to it, they start competing for space, for root space, for nutrients, for sunlight. If you have a larger seedling and then a smaller one right next to it, well, it's being put in the shade forcefully. So that smaller one can't grow, but yet it's still sucking some nutrients out of the soil. It's uptaking water. So you need to eliminate the weaker ones. And each seed packet or online resources will tell you how to thin your seedlings. And I'll show you some examples of that later on the packet and what that looks like. See the top picture versus the bottom picture? I don't like the top. I don't like that method because when you start pulling with your fingers, you have the chance of breaking the ones you want to keep. And also, if you have 2 or 3 little plantlets growing together, their little roots are like little bitty hairs and they're all intertwined and mixed together. If you pull the smaller one out, you're culling, you're also potentially damaging the root of the one you want to keep. So it's better to use small scissors or shears and to go in and just kind of clip the weaker ones and to allow the stronger ones to remain. So I do like the bottom method better. Use some sharp scissors. These plants are so young and tender that once you clip their stem, they will not come back. The root will shrivel up and die. So try not to use your fingers. If you're really good at it, that's fine. But a safer way is to use shears and just go in there and selectively prune out, cull out the weaker plants. We just talked about that. Sometimes you can carefully use a fork or a tool to divide your plants. A lot of times, if you go to the big box stores, you can buy a cucumber plant and it might have three little plants in there. Well, if they're spaced far enough apart, you can use forks and just kind of gently pry them apart. And then you've got 2 or 3 plants. So you saved a little bit of money. But do that at your own risk. Don't get mad at me if you break roots and then, all 3 are gone. So, just use some caution when you do that and realize these roots are still very, very tender and susceptible to breakage. So use your best judgment on that. All right, so here are some examples back of the seed packet. On the left-hand side, see I circled in red, it says thin 2 to 3 per group. So you shouldn't have 4 to 5 in that little cluster, 4 to 5 plants. You should just have 2 to 3 in that little group. So if you've got 4 to 5, go ahead and eliminate a few. So you only have 2 to 3 remaining. And then right above that, see where it talks about the seed depth? It says plant it 1 inch deep. I talked about that earlier. So your seed packet will give you that specific information. And then to the right-hand side, that one says thin plants to 1 to 2 per hill. So there is no guessing at this. They will tell you exactly when to plant, how deep to plant, when to thin, when you can harvest. And on the right-hand side, on the top part, see where it says days to germination, 4 to 13 days. Well, if you planted these seeds, for example, and you didn't put a date. Remember I said put a date after you plant, put the name and the date of the seeds so that you know what's going to grow. That will tell you exactly when you should start seeing little green plants popping up. So if it's beyond 13 days, let's say it's day 16, day 18, something's wrong. So this is why you should label and date the seeds. All right, bumping up. This is important. The picture on the left, see how those are really tiny? I think they're like 1 inch wide little planting holes. Well, you may need to bump those up so that the plant can get big enough where you think it can withstand the wind in your area or your garden. So if you do bump up, make sure you bump up to the next size container. So if you have these little 1 inch plants, don't put them in a 1 gallon container. That's just overkill. It needs to be the next size container. So the picture on the right is a good example. That's a little, 1 inch seedling, and they're bumping it up to, the next level pot. You don't want to put something that tiny in a 1 gallon container because when you water it, that plant cannot uptake all of that water. That water cannot evaporate fast enough. So then there you are in the situation of maybe getting root rot, having fungal issues and such. That's why it's really important to put it in the correct size pot. So always the next size up. All right, so you have planted your seeds, you did everything right. They're looking really good. Are you ready to plant them outside? No, 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 no. One more step. And this is also another reason why people lose their plants. They go through all that trouble, weeks and weeks and weeks of nurturing, caring, babysitting their little seeds, and then they take them outside, pop them in the garden. No, no, no. You need to harden those off. Hardening means to basically harden them off. So the definition, the process of acclimating plants and seedlings to the outside environment before planting them outside. Never transfer plants grown indoors directly outside, because the sun, the wind, it can get transplant shock, it can die within a day. So that sun, or imagine you being indoors for, 2 months, and then all of a sudden somebody puts you out in full sun. You're going to get sunburnt, you're probably going to get dehydrated. It's just going to be a bad, bad situation. And indoors, when you have your seeds by a window, it's protected indoors, right? It's got a good climate. It hasn't been windy in your house. But when you stick that plant outside and a gust of wind comes through, your little stems, they're so weak and tender, they'll break. So you need to gradually put them outside and let them harden off over time so that they can withstand, a little bit of movement. They can get a stronger stem. They can get used to the sun gradually. So give them some time to adjust to the hot sun and wind before you throw them outside. It normally takes 1 to 2 weeks to do this. So you have to be patient, gradually increase your time. So let's say your plants are ready to go. You've got 20 plants to go. Take them outside the first day and put them under a sheltered patio where it's just shady. They might get a little reflective sunlight, but they're not getting any direct sunlight, okay? Bring them in. The next day, put them outside. Oh, so the first day you might want to do it for like an hour. Second day, you might want to bump it up to 2 hours and gradually move them closer and closer to the outside world where they're getting a little bit more sun. So the first day of full sun might be just 30 minutes. The next day, a full hour. So you get my point. Just gradually introduce them to the sun and wind so that they don't go, and you have death after all that work you've done. So I talked about this earlier. Day 1 should always be in a shady area before you put them out in that sun. Texas sun can be brutal. All right, so now you are ready to plant. But guys, you cannot plant your plants. You can't just dig a hole outside and plant, okay? If you want a big bumper crop of cucumbers, peppers, whatnot, you can't just go out in our clay alkaline soil, dig a hole and put your little baby plant in there. You're not going to have a big yield. You're not going to be proud of what comes off of that plant. The plant will survive, but you're not going to be able to brag to your friends and neighbors, oh, look at this huge harvest. You have to have good soil. Sunlight and water, of course, are also critical, but soil is the foundation. So make sure you amend your garden soil. You can use some compost. I'm a huge composter, so if you're not doing it already, please try to learn it. If you don't want to make it, that's fine. You can go out and buy some good compost. You can buy some composted manure, mushroom compost, worm castings. Just mix it in, make your soil more fluffy so that the roots will be happy. When your roots are happy, your plant will be happy, then you'll be happy because you're going to have all this harvest that you can share with your friends. Be sure to mulch. Not only does mulch help your roots when it's really, really hot, it keeps it cool, it conserves water. And as you guys know, we're in a drought. I know it rained yesterday, but we are, it's getting serious with the water, with a lot of people moving into the area. We really need to watch out with our water consumption. But mulch also keeps dirt and debris from splashing up on your plants. So mulch is multi-purpose, water as needed. It is better to drip irrigate your plants than to use a sprinkler system. Now, I'm not talking about lawns. I'm talking about, shrubs, your veggie garden, anything like that. It is always better to do a slow drip versus spraying, because spraying the leaves can cause a lot of fungal issues, especially tomatoes. They do not like their leaves wet. Roses do not like their leaves wet. You can get a lot of, fungal issues that way. So deep, slow watering that penetrates deeper into the soil is much better. Okay, I'm going to talk about tomato seeds and plants because my students always want me to even repeat this information. A lot of people don't know this. You might know it. So just be a little patient with me here if you already know this. But if you go out to get tomato seeds or a tomato plant, some people get confused because they're like, I did everything I was supposed to do, but my tomatoes came out and I thought everything was great, but then I didn't have any more tomatoes. Well, you bought the wrong type, okay? Indeterminate versus determinate. I'll give you some time to kind of look over this chart. I really like this chart because it explains the difference, and I'll add to it, but please take a look. Okay, so indeterminate, those are going to be more the vine tomatoes. They're going to be tall. They normally need a tomato cage or some type of trellis or support because they like to grow tall. Indeterminate is going to be good. Those are tomatoes that you're going to get all growing season long. So if you like tomatoes in your salad, the whole summer, get indeterminate because you'll have tomatoes popping up here and there. Determinate tomatoes, on the other hand, you get all of your tomatoes in one time. So like 1 to 3 weeks period. If you are making salsa or marinara and you need a lot of tomatoes at the same time, determinate is the way to go. But see the difference? The left, indeterminate, you're going to get tomatoes here and there throughout the season, whereas determinate, bush type tomatoes, you're going to get, it's like one and done. All the tomatoes at once. You can share them with friends, but be prepared to can, share them, give them away, because it's going to all happen at once. So again, if you like tomatoes on your salads throughout the year, get indeterminate. If you want to can salsa, marinara, and need a lot of tomatoes at once, get determinate. So that's the difference. Okay, how do you know? How do you know your tomatoes are determinate or indeterminate? This picture here, sometimes you have to hunt and peck and kind of like look for it. See the first paragraph, the first word, it says indeterminate. Okay, so this tomato, the tomato beefsteak variety, will give you tomatoes throughout the growing season. Here's the next example. That information, can you find it? I see it. It's in the top. Clusters of pear-shaped yellow fruits with mild, delicious flavor. Indeterminate. So sometimes it's on the back of the package, sometimes it's on the front. So you kind of have to look around. Here's another example. This is on the front of the package. Do you see it? It's kind of in the middle of all those words. They both say determinate type. So now you know, depending on how you need your tomatoes, go out and get the right one, indeterminate or determinate. All right. So hopefully you guys are now set up for success and you know how to avoid damping off issues. You know how to correctly water and take care of your seeds. You know how to store your seeds, how to label them. If you guys have any other questions, please let me know.